Welcome back to iMissions. Steve Poplar here, and I have a special guest here, Sarah, who is serving over in Costa Rica as well as Lebanon, doing missions work. And there's going to be a video at the end that you can link to over on my other channel, but there'll be several other videos on this channel as well. But we're here to talk about your experience in missions. Could you tell us just a little bit about what you learned about missions?
Missions, one thing that I really learned is it's not about Americanizing people or changing their culture to fit yours because your culture is the right way to do things. Missions is much deeper than that. It is not as surface as just culture. It's about their hearts, and it's about touching their hearts with Jesus' love, because that's really more important than culture anyways. Bringing them one step closer to hopefully a salvation experience. So it's very much humbling yourself, admitting that they're going to do things differently than you, and that that's okay. It doesn't have to go your way.
In your time both in Costa Rica as well as Lebanon, what did you see as the key differences, and how different were the people there versus back here where you're from?
Not different at all, really. Not in the way that you would think. The mannerisms might be different, the way they greet you might be different, but at their heart, they were all the same as we are. They hurt, they love family, they have joy. The way that they express it might be differently, but once you can get past needing things to look the way that you're used to seeing it, you can really see the deeper emotions beneath it and realize that we're all just people. And
You did some tremendous work from what you were sharing about both in Lebanon, several places in Lebanon, working with Syrian refugees as well there, and also with the people of Costa Rica. So you had a lot of experience with a lot of different kinds of people, Christians in Lebanon and Muslims in Lebanon and all that. So what do you think the biggest difference was between your experience between Costa Rica and Lebanon?
I think, well, it depended on what part of Costa Rica. We spent a week, several days in the jungle area. And it was very secluded there. There were villages, and the villages would be made up of several families. And it's very tight-knit in that, I don't want to say they're suspicious of outsiders, because that's not what it is. Because they would be friendly, but they're very almost shy. And then once you earn their trust, they would open up to you, and you would be in every part of their life. Versus over in Lebanon, it was more of a city area, and it was much more of, they would invite you in all the time, but then it was almost more of a custom thing.
Yeah.
Like they were supposed to be that friendly.
Okay.
But then once you spent a certain amount of time with them, if you would, I don't know, pass the test or whatever, then they would really start to open up to you. So I think it was just like that initial impression.
Now, you speak Arabic, and you also speak Spanish fluently, right?
I wish, right?
So how did you communicate the gospel to people when you couldn't speak the language?
Well, sometimes it was a bit of a game. We did have, it was funny. There were also Kurdish people in Lebanon, and Kurdish is a people group. And some of the Kurdish people, they were refugees who did not speak Arabic, but their children would. And so sometimes when we were actually verbally trying to tell the gospel, someone on our team would say it in Spanish, then our translator would translate it to English, then it would be translated from English to Arabic, and then the child would translate it from Arabic to Kurdish. So when you're doing that, you have to be very, very concise. You use the words wisely because it is a long process, so you try to condense it, but you also kind of have to use more basic phrases. You don't want to use fancy words because of translation. The not as well-known words, they often don't have a translation for. So to try to say what you actually want to say, you want to keep it simpler. But more than that, we did a lot of communicating with our facial expressions, really with us, how we were acting, how we were living, body language. That you can see in someone's eyes. So even when you don't understand, you can see in their eyes, and that you can feel love I think we did a lot of communicating through love and through our actions, way more than our words ever spoke.
You shared before, too, also you used a lot of skits.
We did, yes. We would go and visit a home, and we would have a little booklet of these stories for the kids and little games for them. And one thing we would do is that we would let them pick one of the parables, and we would act it out for them, and we would include them in acting it out. And that was always fun for them. I made a fabulous lost sheep, as we found out. My ba was superb. But we would do little things like that, and we would just have fun with them. And once you could connect through having fun, even the parents would get involved too. And then afterwards, we would go through some questions and let them ask questions. And this was where I really felt like God was moving, because the parents would often ask some very deep questions there. And we were able to give them hope and tell them, you are that lost sheep, and he is searching, and he wants to welcome you home, and he's always going to be there for you, because they face so much rejection. Knowing that there is someone who is always welcoming them with open arms, really, it brings life to them. It really does.
And you guys were also doing some food distributions, too, I believe you're saying?
Yes, that was one of my favorite parts, because I like working with my hands. So we had these big bulk sacks of food, and we would break it down into smaller bags, and then those bags of different, like rice and beans, things like that, would go into another sack, and then we would deliver those sacks. There was someone in the local community who knew the families that were most in need, and so they were on a list, and they had a punch card, and when we gave them their food for that month, we would punch their card, and they were always so appreciative. And that was also a very good tool for getting into places or into families where they didn't know what to think about the church, or they were skeptical, because we were willing to help them when other people weren't. One of the ladies that I loved, she kept her card folded up in a white cloth, and she kept it on the desk right by the door, and it never left there. The only time she took it out of that cloth was to get it stamped, and then she put it back immediately, because it was that precious to her. And so this was just such a good tool that we were able to use, to, caring for their needs, to also just to brighten their day, not to push religion on them, but to help them, like anyone who loves someone else would.
Yeah. What did you see as how important the local churches were to the work that you were doing?
They were very important, the local bodies of believers, because in just the faith in that area, the Muslim faith especially, there was not a lot of support from person to person, at least from what I could tell. And that was what was really hallmarking the church, was their love for each other. And it was such a new experience for many of those people. They had never seen people loving one another like that before, even if they didn't always get along or came from even different streets, because things are very much, you may not associate with that person simply because they come from that side of the street, and you just don't go to that side of the street. So the churches were breaking down these walls, and this is something very new for a lot of them.
Yeah. And how about the churches in Costa Rica? They were probably leading a little more there in the missions and the outreach and such?
A little more. We actually did not have as much ministry with the churches in Costa Rica, probably because, our week in the jungle, churches are very far, very few in between. There was a church there. First off, these villages are really, they're made up of groups of families, and they're not very large, but it's all family based, and they all know each other, they help each other, they keep each other safe, and they do that. This local village had a church, but it was going through a split, and it was a very traumatic time for a lot of these people. Neighbor was turning on neighbor. A lot of people just wanted to give up on the church because it was only bringing grief and no good from it. Because if you think about it for us, when our churches go through splits, it's like, that doesn't really shake your world much. It happens all the time. But for them, being that they are so close-knit, it's now family against family. And your family is your safety. And so it's very hard for them. But we were able to help encourage them. And while we weren't able to solve any of their problems, we were able to pray with them And it was encouraging them for them to see Christians from other places that were still walking strong in the faith, and that they knew that they were able to do that too.
So if there's somebody on the other side of this camera that's interested in getting involved in missions or going on a mission trip, what advice would you have to give to them?
Be humble, because things aren't going to go according to your plans, and that's okay. And you're not there for yourself either. Where you are going to be greatly blessed from it. God doesn't waste any opportunity to work on you, but you're not there for you. And if you keep that as your focus, you keep God and others as your focus, then you will find yourself learning and going places that you never imagined. And go out of love. Don't go because you're trying to win the heathen or trying to earn favor with God, because that's not what it's about. This mission work is about love, and if you don't love the people that you're trying to go to, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make a difference, because missions at its heart is love. So I'd say love and walk humbly with God. Be selfless and be okay with plans changing all the time, because God knows best and his plan is better than ours, and he knows exactly where he needs you. So if you had your children's ministry ready to go for the day and then, well, you're on house visits or now you're doing construction, just roll with it, because it doesn't matter where you are. That's your mission ground, and that's where God needs you right at that moment. So.
Do you have any other stories that really just stand out to you?
Yes, actually, this one really touched my heart. It was actually during our time in Costa Rica. We were traveling to one of the remote villages in Costa Rica, and we were delivering Bibles to them. And they were Bibles in their language, which was amazing, because for many of them, this was going to be their first time seeing a Bible, but then seeing one also in their own language. And by the way, people, just because they don't have access to Bibles doesn't mean they're uncivilized. I don't know, somehow we think of cannibals when we think that they've never seen a Bible, but that's not what it is. Bibles there were just hard to come by, and then to find one in your own language. So we hiked to this. Well, we rode canoes, we hiked, we rode in the back of a truck. We did a lot of things, a lot of walking though, and up very steep mud mountains is what I'm going to call it. It was a very orange mud that had been there for years. It was like knee deep. So it was a bit of a hard climb, and it was getting to be midday. The sun was very hot. It's being that you're in a jungle area, it's very humid. Your sweat sweats. It's like that. And then you're hiking uphill on top of all this. And I'll be honest, after several hours of it, I was getting a little self-pitied, I guess. I was, my feet hurt really bad because these shoes don't fit right, and I don't know that I can make it, and all those kinds of things. And about that time, we were stopping for a break, and our guide to this village was an elderly gentleman, and you could tell he had lived a hard life. I mean, he walked kind of hunched over, and he looked old and frail, but somehow he was carrying our boxes of Bibles. He had insisted upon it at the very beginning. And so we were on this break, and we were looking at him thinking, if we're this tired and we've just been carrying our packs, this guy's got to be dying. Like, we know that he does this walk all the time, but he's got to be dying with that load. So we offered to take the Bibles and put them in our own packs, and he politely refused and said, "This is the most precious weight I have ever carried in my entire life." And that,
Wow.
that was like a slap in the face to me. I was like, man, how selfish am I? I was just, first world problems. And then that was really the kick that I needed, where this man loved this village so much. He didn't even know people were going to read these Bibles. He didn't know if they would accept them. But he was just willing to give them the chance and to suffer for it.
Wow.
And I had a new energy in my step after that, and a new humbleness, a new thankfulness. So that man just really, he taught me a lot about true love and humility.
quite an adventure. We're going to have some more coming at you, some more episodes. If you click down here, you're going to find a box that will take you to Poplar Preparedness, where we do an interview with her. But then also up here, more videos and more stories from Sarah.